Preparation is everything. Training is everything. When you drive iron, you do it with intelligence, strategy, and knowledge of what you're doing. You have to understand biomechanics, how the body functions and works. But the most important thing, the way I see it, is your phenotype, your temperament, the way you look in that mirror with your clothes completely off. When you look in that mirror, take pictures. What's your body type like? It's very, very important so that you train properly for who you are. You don't train for somebody else. You train for who you are. And as I always say, I'm 5'2.5". I'm a short man with a tendency to have a big belly. So he has to train with that in mind. I could never compete because I'm not aesthetic. But I can train, if I could turn the clock back, for extreme functionality, power, in every direction. Flexibility, most important. Posture, you train for that posture, that perfect posture in everything you do. And you train aggressively, focused and determined. You train with goals in mind. You meet that goal, you set another goal. But you got to know what you're doing every single moment you drive iron. And every single moment you train. And I recommend doing a lot of other movements along with that to build body functionality, body presence in the world. Presence, poise, aggressiveness, under rational control. Rational control is the number one thing. You need good ego defenses to compensate for everything. And you need to practice hard on the social skills, how to have grace, style, and appeal out there. A very tall order. And if we shoot back to the childhood, that's when the ground for all of this is laid during that public school. We have to watch how the children behave in public school, how they interact with one another. That should be what the teachers should do. And we have the tech to film the children as they're playing and study what's going on, how they interact, where the bullying occurs, I got to know where that bullying occurs and how it's occurring. And I've got to know the behaviors. The behaviors are everything. What's provoking? What's causing that? So, for me, it's very important to step back and question everything. And there's nothing that cannot be questioned, investigated, and interrogated. You can learn from everything. It's called a great teaching moment, a great learning moment. That's what I go for. Try to set situations up that provoke that kind of a thing. But it's very important to be able to listen open-mindedly, to be present open-mindedly, to remember and retain everything you're seeing, to develop a good memory, good observational skills, and always, what are the legal aspects, the social aspects of the behaviors that you're going to do. You've got to know how to justify and explain what you're doing if challenged, depending on who does the challenging and how they approach. You've got to always be aware of signs that order behavior. If it's on a public ground, then you're on public property that can be ordered and determined. If you violate the sign that tells you to do this or do that, you do so at your own risk. You have to be very cautious. And the thing that I always emphasize is critical distance. You have to anticipate a possible problem socially, legally, etc. You have to anticipate it before it's going to happen and take the steps to protect yourself. But I always emphasize a critical distance from what you're doing. You always have to have a good explanation and rationale for everything you do in a public way. You have to know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to be a victim. So the whole thing is about de-victimizing. And that's what everything's about, in my opinion. To take a victim and de-victimize him. To teach him skills. To teach him social skills. But none of this can be done unless the body's powerful in every direction. And it's very possible to be able to do this and accomplish this. And everything I'm saying here answers directly Jordan Peterson and Dr. Phil and Tony Robbins, the big gurus, the big machas. These are the big shots that tell you what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, standards and values. But you have to forge your own identity in a hot crucible. You have to go out there and find out if what you're doing will float in the Bronx. You have to hang it up, your behaviors, and hang it up on the flagpole and see if anyone will salute it. You have to throw it in the Bronx River and see if it'll float. Put it on the mat, see if the cat will lick it up. You have to always test out what you're proposing to do in a social way, and you have to be very objective and question all the facts, question the behavior. That means you have to observe yourself, be aware of what's around you, know how to listen to yourself, and have a good feel of what your body is doing in a public way in the now, in a social situation. I call it a contest. And I say, do the behaviors you want to do, as long as you can handle the consequences of it. There are no ethics, morality, or standards and values that come from abroad. It all comes from experimental factors. Everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. The advice you give to one man will be poison for another. That's why I'm very careful in how I approach a man. And I listen to him very carefully, because for me the most important thing is to be with the man, to listen to him thoroughly and find out who I'm dealing with. And what would apply to one man will not apply to another man. So I want to know if a man proposes a behavior that seems externally, from the point of view of Dr. Phil or Peterson, Jordan Peterson, or Prager, to be antisocial, anti-morality, whatever that may be, however Prager defines it, the radical right. I want to listen to that man very carefully, because maybe what he's doing is what he has to do given his limitations. It's called compensating. The most important thing to remember for me is everybody's replaceable. There's substitutes. Nobody's necessary. And the most important to understand is you're not necessary God's plan. You're not necessary to it at all. The only one who thinks he's necessary is a man who's a fool, like Prager, who thinks he's necessary to an eternal plan, who thinks he's part of God's will, who thinks that there's going to be the promised land and he's going to be rewarded, and that the Savior is coming. But the Savior has allegedly already arrived. You see the contradictions going on with religion. That's why church and state must be separated. Church should have nothing to do with the state and politics. It should have nothing at all to do with that. It takes a long time for a man to know himself and become very objective with what he finds out. Change is very, very, very difficult. Social skills are very difficult to acquire if they're not acquired at the right time and place and developmental period. Then they may never be required because the right foundation has not been laid. That foundation is laid in public school. That foundation is laid on the school ground. That foundation is laid in the classrooms with the interaction with the teachers and parents. And I believe everything must be carefully monitored and reported on. Problems are much easier, listen to me very carefully, problems are much easier to correct if they're done at an early age during grade school. You can see all the potential problems that you're going to have in the future right there in the playground, right there in the classroom, right there with the homework, right there particularly of how these children interact with each other. It's very important. I learned an awful lot from that. And my motto is this: Gentlemen, come to order, gentlemen. Now, I got only one question for you, gentlemen. Do we learn something today in class we didn't know before? Not about my personality as a teacher, not about whether you like me or you don't like me, that's immaterial. I'm asking you, gentlemen, do we learn something we didn't know before, and are we happy because of it? That's the question. The question you ask of a teacher or anybody is not what they look like, not whether they have a great personality or social skills. No, it's the quality of their teaching ability. That's the thing. People don't understand that. We go by looks, we go by personality, we go by all the superficialities. But I see through all that, and I expose all that. That's my job as a philosopher.